Listen, all you gals and boys, I'm just from Tuckahoe. I'm going to sing a little song. My name's Jim Crow. Wheel about and turn about and do just so. Every time I wheel about, I jump Jim Crow. I went down to the river.
In 1836, Jim Crow is born. He begins his strange career as a malicious minstrel caricature of a black man, created by a white man to amuse white audiences. Jim Crow would come to symbolize one of the most tragic eras of race relations in American history, a time deeply rooted in promise and contradiction. 1865, 4 million Americans, slaves simply because they were born black, were now free. But in little over a decade, that promise was gone, replaced by a rigid system of laws designed to keep blacks from experiencing any of their newly achieved rights. It would be known as the era of Jim Crow, the American form of racial apartheid.
Is the reinvigoration of black families with younger black men and black women. And that is also helping to breed the revival of a black middle class in America. You see, during Jim Crow, the black family was together. During Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative, because black people were always a bit conservative-minded, but more black people voted conservatively. And then H.E.W., Lyndon Johnson, and then you go down that road, and now we are where we are. What's happened in America the last 10 years, and I'll say it because
See, Byron Donalds does what most Republicans do, which is semantic Olympics. Technically, he didn't say Jim Crow was a better time. He said black families were intact. What, of course, he does not say is why was that true. It was true because women had no rights. It was true because it was illegal to marry interracially. Also, I find it rich that he, of all people, is waxing poetic about black marriage and black families when he definitely doesn't have one. He has a white wife and biracial children. Yet the most sinister part of all of this is that the hope is if he talks like this, it will entice more black people to vote for Donald Trump, aka Cheeto Mussolini. Also, he wants to be Cheeto's VP. Whatever. He's trying to entice those of us who aren't convicted felons, aren't sneakerheads, and don't have mugshots, which is majority of us. Donalds also diabolically does not make sure to differentiate who the Republicans were during Jim Crow and who the Democrats were. Lincoln, of course, as all black people know, freed the slaves. So for a long time, black people were conservative. Black people did vote Republican for a very long time. But once FDR got elected and he started making programs that were beneficial to black people and poor white people, that's why he was reelected 3 terms before he passed away, because he had done great things for this country, you know, generation changing type of things. The Southern Democrats, aka the Dixiecrats, were the ones who had been enforcing Jim Crow the whole time Jim Crow was the law of the land in the South. So for Donalds not to mention that is disingenuous and an interesting form of gaslighting the rest of us, because if you just straight don't know your history, then you would think that, oh yeah, the Democrats have always been the ones who were racially discriminated against people. But in our current climate, as we know, that is not the case. All of the Southern Democrats switched to the Republican Party in between 1964 and 1965, when the Civil Rights Act was passed by Lyndon B. Johnson, and then the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965 by the same president, LBJ, Lyndon B. Johnson. So for Byron Donalds to just let it hang out there to make it seem like the Republicans have always been great and that the Democrats have always been terrible is insane, but also speaks to something deeper about our country, that we would let something like that lie. At least he thought so, and not go through the trouble of researching and finding what's correct. We're not having it.
Mr. Speaker, it has come to my attention that a so-called leader has made the factually inaccurate statement that black folks were better off during Jim Crow. That's an outlandish, outrageous, and out-of-pocket observation. We were not better off when a young boy named Emmett Till could be brutally murdered without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when black women could be sexually assaulted without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be systematically lynched without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when children could be denied a high-quality education without consequence because of Jim Crow. We were not better off when people could be denied the right to vote without consequence because of Jim Crow. How dare you make such an ignorant observation? You better check yourself before you wreck yourself. I yield back.
Could not protect his wife from rape, could not protect his son from lynching. So again, why would you quote that era and say that at that time, the family all being in the home together was something we should think of as a good thing?
Well, first of all, Joy, the story you bring up and you're bringing up is a tragedy, one of the great tragedies of the Jim Crow era. This is why those policies they were disgusting and distasteful. All I was talking about, Joy, was the benefit of a man in the family.
Again, sir, I'm sorry, I've let you talk for a long time. Sorry, no. Talk over you. You've gotten the chance to speak a lot, Congressman. You're going to answer my question now and not filibuster. This is the question you want. This is the question you need to answer.
That's what I'm trying to answer. That's what I'm trying to answer, Joy.
Give me a second. Take a breath. Take a breath. If a black man could not protect... It's my show. If a black man, a black father, could not protect his wife, his son, or himself from lynching and violence, how is him being in the home mean that that is an era that was better for the black family, or that we should think of as a good thing?
First of all, Joy, I never said that it was better for black people in Jim Crow. I have never said that, and even my own words say that. If you're talking about the importance of black fathers in the home, or frankly, all fathers in the home, it is always for the betterment of children to have leadership, yes, for safety. So having two people in the home to help provide the economic needs for those children so the family can succeed. That is a wonderful thing. We should always get back to that, not to Jim Crow. And this is the point of the gaslighting and the lying that is occurring with what I said. Don't try to impose the fact that the marriage rates were better in the higher, I want to be clear, higher in the Jim Crow era to mean that I think Jim Crow is great. That is a lie. That is gaslighting. I would never say such a thing, which is why the Jim Crow era was destructive of black people.
You brought it up. You're the one who brought it up.
Let's get one more question. And now you're trying to gaslight like everybody else is trying to gaslight.
The timeline was when, one more thing. The poverty rate during Jim Crow was 55.1%. More than half of families were impoverished. You also said, and I'm quoting you again, during Jim Crow, more black people were not just conservative. Black people have always been conservative-minded, but black people voted conservatively. Black people weren't allowed to vote at all during Jim Crow.
Well, first of all, there were areas in the United States where black people did vote. It wasn't universal throughout the United States. So let's just be perfectly honest about that. I just told you it was not universal.
We know Jim Crow
there
wasn't
were areas, but obviously black people were suppressed from voting That's what the purpose of not just the 64 and the 65 voting rights back, but so many others. But let's get back to what I was saying.
So you're inaccurate there.
All I was talking about is about black families. No, I'm not being inaccurate.
During Jim Crow, more black people voted conservative. They didn't vote conservative because they weren't allowed to vote. That is the essence of what Jim Crow is.
So again, Joy, I'm going to come back to my original point. It is talking about the family unit, having more fathers in the home, which creates better people going forward.
Last question, and then I'm going to let you go. Last question. We're out of time,
Sure,
but I'm going to give you one more question. During Jim Crow, could your family have existed? You are in an interracial marriage. Your wife is a white conservative activist. Could your family have existed at all during Jim Crow?
What did you mean by black families were more together during Jim Crow?
Frankly, what that is about the empirical fact that before the Great Society, before Lyndon Johnson's policies, there was more black families united. The marriage rate in black America was significantly higher before the Great Society. The period of time that coincides with that, obviously, is Jim Crow era. And then after the Great Society, the marriage rate in the black community plummeted significantly. The Great Society is a part of that reason, not completely, but it's definitely a part of that. And what you're seeing right now in America is a reformation of black families in America. That's a good thing, not only for the black community and for black families, but it's also a good thing for the country.
So what was the point of tying together the black family and Jim Crow specifically? I mean, Jim Crow, as you know, was a period of racial segregation, of racial terror. Why would you make that connection?
All I was doing was referring to the time periods when you talk about the historical timelines in America and coinciding with black families and what the marriage rate in black families are. The overarching point is obviously talking about what polling shows today, that about 20-25% of the black vote, depending on what poll you're looking at, is leaning towards supporting Republicans and supporting President Trump. The corollary to that is that when you're in a family unit, husband and wife, living together, working together, thriving together, you're raising your kids, your thought process is now talking about building generational wealth. What am I leaving to my children? What kind of communities do I want my children to come up in? What are the educational opportunities? What's going on with the economy? How does, and then to a broader level, how does foreign policy and all these other public policy issues flow into that? And so when you compare the terrible agenda of Joe Biden and what that's done to families in America, coinciding with the fact that you are seeing a reformation of black families in America today, which is an absolutely wonderful thing and needs to continue. My view is it also coincides with a more conservative leaning and a more conservative mindset politically in those families.
One thing I really want to just get you to address is there were a lot of people who heard what you had to say, and a lot of them are offended by the idea that you would repeat Jim Crow 3 times in your comments as if to suggest that that was a time period because that black families were, in your words, together, because, in your words, black people were not just more conservative, they voted more conservatively. That's a good thing. I mean, it sounds like nostalgia. Do you regret using that time frame as a reference?
Nobody ever made nostalgia. That was never the point. It wasn't even about that. So where now I'm going to get my backup is I didn't say that. I didn't even insinuate that. That is where the media and, yes, Hakeem Jeffries and a lot of other people are taking
What exactly didn't you insinuate?
No, back up.
I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. What didn't you insinuate?
The premise of your question, I did not insinuate. That is what people are trying to weave into what I said. What I said is crystal clear. It's on my social media. Go to @ByronDonalds on X. You can see the full clip. Abby, I appreciate you playing the full clip. What you are dealing with right now is a political environment where now anything I might say or any major surrogate might say is going to be twisted into the lens of race. That was never the point, not the idea whatsoever.
Just to clarify my questioning of you,
Sure.
I mean, I understand that this idea that you said it was better, you didn't use the words better. But when you talk about that time period, you're suggesting that because the black family was together, they were better off than they are now.
See, this is the problem, Abby.
So are you
suggested
saying that that's not the
Abby.
case? That the black family was not better
No,
off
I did
when
not
they
say
were,
that.
in your
Abby.
words, together?
Abby, let me put it to you like
in the Jim
this.
Crow era.
Let's agree on something. I am, obviously one of the better communicators in the Republican Party. I know how to put words together. I do it very, very often. So I'm not going to say something that I do not agree with. What America is seeing right now, especially Black America, is the gaslighting that unfortunately does happen in politics, where you take my comments and you want to weave your own political viewpoint into what I said. What I said is very clear.
I asked you to explain because I wanted to. What I want to undo is understand what you're saying here. Because if you're making a comparison, you're saying the black family was together then, they're not together now, and you're using that to try to say that things are bad now. Well, first of all, let me just to set the table here. By pretty much every available measure, black families, black individuals in this country are better off today than they were during Jim Crow. Would you agree with that?
Abby, of course I would. I'm not making that point, and this is the problem. What the Democrats, what Hakeem Jeffries did on the House floor, what Jamie Harrison, what the president of the NAACP, what the Biden campaign, because they're the ones who started this, it was really the Biden campaigns who were trying to cherry pick everything. They're trying to twist my words into saying something. I never said that. What I was talking about was specifically black families. And the point that black families being together is a great thing for the black community. And you do have to acknowledge the empirical fact that before Lyndon Johnson's policies and the welfare state that was created in the United States, I'm not talking about good, bad, or indifferent.
What about
black families were, black marriage rates were significantly higher.
Well, what about
They're
other
rising
things that
again
might
in
have,
America. That's a good thing. We should celebrate
other things that may have contributed to the, maybe the decline in marriage rates, which, by the way, is not unique to black families. That's happening actually across racial groups. But what about other things? I mean, what about redlining? Do you think that had an effect on the black family? What about mass incarceration? What about the war on drugs, which was pushed by a Republican president whose advisor said it was specifically to target black people? What about all of those things?
Look, if you want to talk about redlining and a lot of the other policies that were put forward, quite frankly, by the Democrat Party, if you're going to go back to Jim Crow, because Jim Crow was Democrat policies.
Well,
that's what that was.
I know that
Abby,
you know
don't cut me off when I'm trying to make a point.
Let me just,
Abby.
I have to correct on a factual point here. I know that you know that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party of today are ideologically not what they were during Jim Crow. You know that, Congressman. So to suggest that the Democrats of 1920 are the same ideologically as the Democrats of today is inaccurate. So just, you can continue, but I wanted to...
That's not totally true, Abby, and I think if we want to have that conversation about the policy positions between Republicans and Democrats, we can have that conversation.